given everything that we've been through over the last 8 weeks, I think you should do one massive pat on your back. And I hope you feel that. I hope you feel how well it went. Because Rob mentioned immediately the difference in having a live audience. Yeah. 1, it was a great audience, and 2, they were really supportive. And 3, you could hear a pin drop and nobody, I've had texts going, no one got out a mobile phone to check the time. Nobody left, nobody moved. Do you know how extraordinary that is in this day and age? Because usually you go to theatre and people are like, oh God. The fact that they were engaged for an hour and 40 and nobody, not even 12-year-old boys and girls, moved. They were just like that.
Like from the first scene, when we did the folk and we did the hey thing, and we got the response from the audience, I knew that they are with us, that, you know, we can keep on like presenting next things and they will stick with us, you know, and it's something that you really, as a performer, feel like the kind of, that there is the air between us and them, and it's shifting and moving, so I could really feel it in that night.
It's only by performing it to a live audience that you really understand what on earth you've made, right? Because if it's just me or me and Rob on the outside going, no, that works, oh no, that doesn't work, you don't really know. But if you've got a collective group of people also feeding back to you in that feedback loop from performance to watching, then you can begin to read that transaction between you and the audience. And that is what live theatre is all about. 3 things that you got out of performing on Thursday for yourself that was so different from being in the studio.
I guess the first one for me as a reflection is kind of based on my area of responsibility, which, you know, we were doing the kind of backstage stuff. And I appreciated or noticed the difference just from the dress to the performance, even of how much responsibility you guys were taking, and that you were actually making choices and not just, you know, looking for everybody else to hold it for you. And that was kind of 2 parts, because in as much as you were taking choices, you were also really backing each other's choices. So there wasn't that thing of like, somebody goes and there's like is that the right cue or not the right cue, or what do we do? There was a sense of, right, okay, the decision's been made and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it to the absolute best we can. And, you know, that kind of decision making and full commitment to decisions was really like a strong step up in the process. And I think, you know, from my position in terms of how I've worked in the process with you guys, that was like, yeah, that felt good, really good to see. In the performance, there was that kind of sense of the sense of fun that we talked about, like finding those moments of kind of like enjoyment even in the chaotic bits, even in the bits which are like, we know are a bit like, oh God, but that energy you were like building backstage to take into the scenes. We weren't so stuck with whatever we'd just done. Even, you know, whatever it was, we were ready to do the next thing and to fully commit to that next thing. And it's also,
like we've done that shift,
a really clear indication of moving out of rehearsal and into performance.
Interesting.
Because rehearsal, you can't let go of that thing, because you're probably going to stop and do it again. Whereas in performance, like, it happens once in front of that audience. So there's no point being so in that moment you've just done.
That's also really interesting. That's a real lesson in letting go. Like if something didn't work, or if you interrupted a solo, or if you came on too soon and busked it, that's a really good discipline to learn, of like not being attached to what went wrong, if anything, or even what went right, but applying, which is Rob saying, applying your skill to the next thing and your concentration to the next thing. That is a massive skill to learn as a performer.
If something went wrong, we just carried on and worked it out. And whereas with rehearsals and direction, if something goes wrong, you stop and you go over it and you start again, whereas this just kept running. So yeah, it felt like, very different.
What was the difference between making this work and rehearsing it in the studio to performing it? What did you get out of performing it?
I think when you started as a speech in the beginning, and then you encouraged the audience, and they laughed, and I think it gave for me, it gave more of like good luck, or more how like supporting, because they laughed and I understand like, okay, they're calm, it's like they're friendly, something like that, you know. That felt, I don't know, I got it like a little smile on my face and more confident.
Yeah. And the hey as well, the folk
Yes.
hey, because believe me, over the years we've gone hey to absolutely dead silence, and that sets the show off in a really different tone. But yeah, they were, the fact that they went hey with you and clapped was great. Did you discover new things by performing with an audience? And if so, what were they?
Yes, I did. I think there were, I think I went more for it, and maybe it will be a different answer to the question. I think I gave it like, as I understood, it was like the only chance, and I think I was like, okay, now or never.
Yes.
It's
our only chance.
No, not only chance, but I mean, maybe when I was doing tanga, I think I tried to do, I quite improvisated, so I didn't do as much of stuff that I did in rehearsing, and I don't know what I'm talking about.
You just added a few leg moves that made it. No, it was great. It was really great. So, what did you discover about performing live?
I think a big part of it for me was the space, because I think it was more the light, because it was so dark in there, and it felt really like a different world to everyday normalness, and it was really different from the rehearsal space, like this space and the other place, because both this and the other place are really bright and normal, whereas in the Corn Exchange it was massive and completely like really dark with the lighting, and it made all the props or the set feel different. It all has the same aesthetic, and it really brings all the scenes together like it's one world, one place, and it felt to me like we were all the same, like ourselves, one person each, like being in different scenes but still being the same character, exploring those different parts and aspects of that one world all together. And yeah, I think...
Did you feel like you all the way through it?
Yeah, I did. I've never been in a show where I've played, been myself, I've been another character, and I think that really changed the way I felt about the piece.
Normally in our work, we don't call performers characters, because we're not putting on a costume to become somebody else. We're sort of like a heightened version of ourselves, which is why it's very gratifying that you felt that, because that is the big difference between starting with a script and starting with a group of people who try to bring what they can to the work. It's more like try this material on for size rather than a character, if that makes sense, and then somehow make it your own. You know, I was going on about the practicality, the functionality of the scene clearing and the stage management. Did it then feel different when you stepped into a scene and worked with more abstract movement?
With the transitions, it felt like it was more just us clearing up, sorting it out, and there was a big difference for me between the two.
In how you held yourself or how you operated as a person on stage?
With,
were you more aware of the audience in the scenes, maybe?
I was, yeah. When you're in one of the scenes, you really, you're really part of that, and that's, you're concentrating on it, and you're exploring those different types of movement and themes. And then with the transitions, it felt like you were just being you, practically clearing up, and yeah, it felt there was a really big difference between the two.
How did you find performing live, and what was the difference between performing for an audience, some of whom you knew and some of whom you didn't? What was the difference? Because I felt like, particularly with you too, you stepped up massively from rehearsal mode into performance mode.
I feel like I like it when I'm on a bigger stage, because it really makes me feel free. And I feel like in a smaller space, I get a bit kind of claustrophobic almost, and just a bit distracted more easily. But when I go into like a big performance space, I kind of like analyse the space on the first day, and then, because I have to, I've got to just, analyse it, and then I like really just feel like I can just be free because it's such a big space.
That's really good to know, actually, because that makes complete sense to me from talking to you in the rehearsal room. And, we can all feel closed in by four walls sometimes, but I think...
If I'm in, like, a room, it's, like, four walls, and it's just, like, clumped like that. But if it's, like, it's a big space, so with a big ceiling and, like, a high roof, and it's very, like, freeing, and I feel a lot more energised in it. I feel like my energy really shines through in it.
So it's the volume of the space that helps you?
Yeah.
Okay, and what about the live audience? How does that alter things for you, is a better question.
I feel like if I'm in rehearsal space, it's like I can feel when people are looking at me, like from behind especially, and I can just like feel it, and it just makes me nervous. But then when I'm in like a performance space, everyone kind of came there to watch me, and they spent their money on it, and then they're all looking at me from the front, and it's like a warm energy.
You were quite front lit, and the lights were quite bright. They were quite dark at times as well, but could you see the audience as you were performing?
I know they're there, like there's the energy of them being there, but at the same time it's like I'm not going to try and like look for someone or like see people directly looking at me.
And it's a different kind of scrutiny, isn't it? Like if it's me and Rob, or the chaperones, whatever, looking at you in a rehearsal room, you know that I'm going to say something, I'm going to give you feedback, you're going to have to take that on to a certain extent. And that can be quite, challenging for everybody, especially if you're trying to stay in the moment. I know that about directing, it can be hard work. But is it also something to do with you're not going to get any verbal feedback? You just keep ploughing on, as Tegan was saying?
Yeah, once the show started, it's kind of like, it's just the show. There's no one's gonna give me any verbal feedback. Yeah.
It's not a runaway train, but you're on a track and it's going in a certain direction, and you've almost got to give over to where it's going. Is there something about more responsibility or less responsibility in that state where you've got this stuff to get through?
I feel like it's like less responsibility. I quite like it because it's like I know what I'm doing, and it's not like I get a bit confused if I don't know what I'm doing. If I know what I'm doing, it's really like, yeah, it's like secure.
Talk to me about the difference between the rehearsal process and then Thursday night with a live performance.
As soon as I walked into the space, like opposite of Tia, it was very daunting, and the high ceilings, the large walls, and the whole, for me, the reputation of the space was quite daunting, and having to perform there and give something to the audience and give them what they want. And for me that was very like nerve-wracking. When we pulled it off, I think it was really like interesting to see 5 small people in such a big space with such confidence and like lots of energy. And we all went up to the stage and we all sat on stage with the audience coming in, which was a new thing for me especially, and I really, really enjoyed it. It felt, because it didn't feel like I was going to enter on stage and there were like people. It's like I knew that they were there and I could see them coming in, and I was like, oh, it's fine, they're just normal people. Like, and for me, it felt really, really freeing to just like improvise and not need to, like nothing really was the wrong thing. Partly because I couldn't hear what we were doing and they could just like see what we were doing. But I really, really enjoyed that, and I think it created a positive, a positive start to the show, and like calmed me down a bit. And it was just like they're just normal people. Like, it's not a big deal.
And what does that tell you about the construct of normal conventional theatre, like codes of behaviour on when you make a show, like the kind of dinner, particularly for dance? Because often we've talked about this for years, that often you come on from the flat in a big jeté or a big whatever, and it's just like it abstracts the body. Whereas if I'm really interested in this thing that if you're sitting around chatting, this idea that you look more normal, then I think what happens is that you carry into what Tegwin was saying about you can be yourself more, because you're starting from a kind of, you're starting from you, being in a space as you, rather than being in a space as a character. And so what happens is you can then ease into the performance. When it does shift into performative mode, you can do that more with less kind of panic or hassle or fear, actually, because you're already there.
Yeah, and I think the audience probably appreciate that more because they can be like, oh, they're just normal people, but they're doing these amazing things, and I feel like they then feel much more like, wow, this is incredible, rather than us like bursting out of nowhere in a jetty and being like, oh, that's cool. But because they've seen us in our normal state and they've seen us just being chatty on stage and everything, and then once we burst out with these amazing scenes and like sections, like they're like, wow, that's impressive. And how they've just gone from sitting on the stage being normal to dancing around like in a chicken dance.
Being a chicken.
For me, because I did the big test run scene, I felt very honoured to do that, but I also felt very, very nervous because especially that the audience can see what it's previously done. So they saw the video of Janusz doing that like section of movement, and I was like, wow, I've really got to like live up to expectation. And that was really like scary for me because I wanted to like do it good. Like I wanted to do it well and to not put a bad impression of that. And I wanted to give the audience what they wanted from what they just seen on the video to on stage live. I loved the ending because I felt at peace. Like we'd just done this massive show. We've just pulled out all these props and all these amazing things. And then we were just stood there reflecting and taking all in, because in that moment like my brain wasn't still. I was like, it was all rushing through my head. I was like, look here, look there, and then lots just happened, all of this stuff, and then suddenly like the lights were starting to go down. I was like, just relax, and I relaxed and I just looked out and it was like, whoa, like what, that's just happened, and it was just crazy. And it was a really, really nice feeling. It was really rewarding to feel that.
And how do you think the audience responded in the end?
I think they loved it. All the responses I've had, they've really enjoyed it. They said it was so different and it was so something to think about, and it was interesting the whole way throughout. Like there were messages, there were things to be put across. It was and enjoying what we were giving them.